Hi, my name's Mark, and welcome to the For a Lifetime podcast. What it means to be a Christian can look very different from person to person. Here at the For a Lifetime podcast, we discuss what it means to live passionately with Jesus for a lifetime. Jesus calls us to lifelong discipleship, and life with Jesus is like no other. We are shaped by what we see and hear from others, and I hope the unique experiences and perspective that God has richly blessed me with will inspire and enrich your life as we strive together to passionately follow Jesus for a lifetime. Today, I want to share the origin of when I first started using this phrase, for a lifetime, and what that phrase means for me today. I came up with this phrase, for a lifetime, when my wife and I started raising money to go to Turkey as missionaries just over 20 years ago. When I first became a Christian, I remember saying to myself, if it isn't true or real, it will show itself over time. But in the 4 or 5 years that I had been a Christian at that time, I was all in. When I went to college, I would say that I wanted to be a pastor, a missionary, or a Christian counselor. I thought that real Christians had to be in full-time ministry. Thankfully, that wrong view was corrected while I was in seminary working on my Master's of Divinity. I had to work a secular job, and it was then, while I was frustrated at JCPenney's and then working at Jiffy Lube and then at Starbucks, that I began to see there was real ministry opportunities in all of those jobs. Those secular jobs weren't necessary evils. They were opportunities for me to live out my faith and be blessed and be a blessing. But I was still intense, and I felt called to go to a place where there weren't any Christians, learn the language and the culture, share the gospel, establish a church, hand it over to local people who had become Christians, and then go somewhere else, do it all over again. This calling and Turkey were a natural fit. Turkey then and now has the least number of Christians per capita than any other country in the world. There are over 80 million people in Turkey and only 8,000 Protestant Christians. Most of the Christians are in 4 big cities, so there are thousands of cities in Turkey with no Christian witness. When I first went to Turkey on a vision trip, we were told by the Turkish Christians and the missionaries there that Turkey was a hard place. So many missionaries had gone to Turkey to serve, but most would return only a few years later. It was this reality that motivated me to start using the phrase for a lifetime to title our prayer letters. I was committed to serve in Turkey for a lifetime. I wanted to serve in Turkey for my lifetime. I believed that for a church to be established in a small city that had no Christians, that it would take a lifetime or more of Christians sharing the gospel. I still believe that it requires a huge investment if we want to see healthy churches established in Turkey. But after being in Turkey a few years, I realized how arrogant I was in this thinking. My desire and perspective wasn't wrong with the phrase for a lifetime. My belief that I had control how long I would live in Turkey was wrong. During the years, I had come to grips with the fact that missionaries were being thrown out of the country. I was afraid of getting thrown out of the country. I felt that if we got thrown out of the country, that God was at fault, and it challenged my faith. My desire to live and serve in Turkey didn't change, but the way I viewed the phrase for a lifetime has. For a lifetime shifted to meaning that I want to live by faith and trust in God in all areas of my life. The wonder, adventure, big hopes and dreams, vibrancy of fellowship with Christ is what I want for a lifetime, for my lifetime. I want this for others too. That is why I've started this podcast. The scope of this podcast will be broad. I will share stories and experiences I've had. I will have guests on who will share their stories and experiences. We will discuss topics that will be challenging and educating. In all of this, I hope to make much of what God has done and to inspire you to deeper faith in Jesus. Thank you for listening. This has been the For a Lifetime podcast.